My name is Tanya Verhulp, and I'm the Director of Executive Education here at the Hasnt School of Business. Thank you for joining us today for the last session in our spring series of Hasnt Connects. Hasnt Connects was created to help you navigate through these uncertain times with quick tips and ideas to move forward. We have been hosting these sessions every week on a variety of topics, and I want to thank so many of you for joining us over the last 7 weeks. All 7 previous sessions have been recorded and are posted on our website if you're interested in watching any you may have missed. Feel free to post your questions in the chat throughout. We've left plenty of time at the end to get to as many as we can. I would now like to welcome Catherine Connolly, who will be moderating our session today.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I have the distinct pleasure of working with George Al-Haddad today, and we'll be discussing the topic of delivering value, project management during times of uncertainty.
When we finish planning, we start execution and start building whatever product we're building or whatever project we execute. And during all that phase, the customer has some input, but they don't have too much input. We monitor and control, we do some inspection at the end, and we get the customer acceptance, we get to the finished product, and we get the trophy of every project, right? And that is a tradition of us, but which most of us knows about it. It takes time, and there are someone monitoring and controlling this, and it's called the project manager. And over the year,
really linear to me, is that correct?
It's more sequential if you would look at it, Catherine, right? And the project usually 6 months or a year or 2 or 3. You start with a very rigid plan because you spent a lot of time to get the budget and the scope and all the requirement. And if anything, it changed part of that plan, you got to change management and you try to avoid it as much as possible unless you have to, because the prices were gonna go up and the schedule is gonna shift it, the scope is gonna deviate, and that's where the problems start, right? So I wonder how many of us in a project management
rewarded, isn't it, George? A lot of the time, these project managers, they have a bonus system in their companies, and that's how they're rewarded, is making things on time, on budget. So there's a tendency to want to even hide some of this stuff if at all possible. Is that correct?
I hope not, but usually you try to control the budget. And the schedule is important from a contractual aspect, because if the project shifted, what's going to happen is you're going to have a liquidated damage or penalties and all of those. So you try to keep things as much as possible in control. And I'm going to focus on control in a traditional project management, because that's what the project manager does: manage tasks, manage activities, right? So, and he's the final decision maker. Even he has a strong.
It's early in the discussion, but maybe we can have a polling question before we even get started to ask the audience in their experience how well this has worked for them in terms of delivering projects on time and on budget. And I guess while we're waiting for the response to that, maybe we can go to the next slide and have a and follow on with the discussion.
Okay, so on that, waiting for the poll, let's take a crisis. A few years ago, couple decades ago, 9/11. Unfortunate, something happened. FBI had all the information, but they couldn't act on it. Why? Because their computer system and their intelligence system was not linked together. They had a lot of paperwork, and it's too old. An agent versus agent, it doesn't work. They can't tag names, they can't tag anything. So the crisis created, they need a new norm. And similar to the COVID-19 right now, we're coming in, and what is the new norm? Nobody knows. We need to change our processes. We need to change our project management style to deliver quick in a time of uncertainty. So in that aspect.
Yeah, I suspect you're going to tell us about the FBI in a minute, but maybe what we should do is take a look at the results of the polling question so we can set the framework of the discussion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you look at what the poll came back, we got 70 to 90% is a 48% of it. Because yes, it's not going to be 100% because always the project has a change. As much as you want to plan, plan A is not always a plan is going to be successful. You're going to go from plan A to plan B, and always a change. You don't know. There are a lot of unknown in a project, a normal project management style. How to avoid that unknown, and I think we're going to talk about it quite a bit today. So we're back to the FBI situation. Here, what the FBI did. They had this in 2000. They budgeted $180 million to build a new system. They used the normal project management style, Gantt chart everywhere. They create a specification, and by 2004, they spent $559 million, and nothing get delivered. So they had to abandon the project because it was too big. They couldn't get a product on to the agent. They couldn't get anything going. In the same year, they came back, adjusted, and they said, we're going to use different phase. We're going to different mentality. It's the same project management style. Phase gate was called phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. The total budget is $451 million. And by August 2010, they were on phase 2, and they were not and they spent $405 million.
What scares me about this thing, though, is it's not just the money that's been incurred. Is there were outstanding risks there? Like we had 2 buildings go down, and the risks posed by the security of the country and a few other things, right?
Yeah, which we are glad nothing happened, but that's $1 billion from the taxpayer money get wasted, kind of, right? So why all of this? Because the focus on that, and we're gonna compare project management style mindset to the product mindset. All they had is a project. They didn't have a product mindset. So the project mindset is we're focusing on the scope, we're focusing on time, which is the schedule, and we're focusing on the budget. And when we finish, we got the product. And the product mindset, we look from outside to the inside if we want to look at it from that perspective. You look at revenue. I want value. What I'm gonna sell by 6 months from now, or what my client want, what my agent want. They want a system they can enter this information from different area of United States and figure out what's happening, link stuff together. That is the adaptation or the use and the retention of the system. That's a product. They're not talking about this task versus that task. This is this specification versus that specification. What revenue is gonna bring to anybody, and what cost saving we wanna make, because business is built to make money first, right? So all that say, we need to start changing our project mindset to a product mindset, because we wanna bring value to the market. We want to bring value to our customer. We want to bring value to our shareholder. So what they did, they brought in new guys. And those guys, they're going to use a different style. It's called Scrum. It was not early, but it's been used in different area in software engineering. And from April to September, the Scrum team looked at what they spent, what they did. They spent 405. They still have 35 to 40 million dollar in hand. They had 222 contractor and 40 staff. They reduced a contractor from 220 to 40 contractor. They went from 30 staff to 12 staff, and they started their sprint. And we're going to talk more about what is sprint in the next few slides. In September 2010. And by September 2011, they have a fully functional product available to all the agents. And how much
was
they
the
spent?
original budget out of whack, or was it the process, or maybe it was both? I guess, can you add some color in terms of what went wrong?
So what went wrong is a process more than anything, because when the Scrum team came in, they looked at what they could use. They already spent, they purchased a product. We know they purchased material, they purchased stuff. They used it, and they focused on what to bring value. There was, in a case, if you can find it, it's online. There was table and table in the hallway filled of a specification, over 5 tables and almost a room full of table and of paperwork specification. They reduce all of this to what makes sense and what bring value to the agent and make things happen. So we're gonna talk about it a little bit more, but let's think about the concept of minimum valuable product. They brought minimum valuable product and complete increment every time on the 22 sprint. So that's what they did. You're gonna ask me, where all of this come? Is this new? The first document started the new product development game. It's written by two people from Japan, Takujichi and Nonanaka. And it's a Harvard Business document written in 1986. And it talks about how we're gonna think different. And if you look at the document, it talks about a rugby team. What makes rugby different? The rugby team work together and in a small sprint. They scrum and they move through the field little bit by little bit. That's all what the document taught and link it to the business. But where those two guys work too? They work in a Japanese company. Well, let's guess what Japanese. Can you guess what Japanese company, Catherine?
I think it's probably Toyota if I was to have a guess.
You're right. So they work in Toyota. There was a continuous improvement and the quality in their mind always, right? And another document came at around 2007. It's talking about more about decision, how you can make and empower people making decision. So that's where the concept of a Scrum come in.
Just hold on a second, because what seems a little bit odd to me, and maybe you'll get to this, is the fact that 1986 this first came out, and then 2007, more than 10 years ago, and yet Scrum is relatively recent. I mean, these concepts have been around a long time. That surprised me. So why do you think it took so long for them to be adopted?
It's more about being familiar with it. And Scrum, the first Scrum guide came written by Ken Schwab is in 1995. So it's almost 10 years after the first document. And he applied it in the FBI. He was one of the guys who applied it in the FBI in 2010. It's more about why we want to change. Human being doesn't like to change. And bringing a new way, it's not always taken very well. And the change management, we're talking about change management here. You need to create safety. You need to create people ease. You need to work with a lot of people. And if it's working, why I want to break it? Project management, traditional project management, nothing wrong with it, but sometimes cannot handle complex work. And that's where Scrum come in. It handle a complex environment, unknown. Why I budget $1 million when I don't know what I'm really doing? Even I create all the specification. When things go sideways, you change the whole concept. You're gonna create a new change management, right? So that's why I think the adaptation of a Scrum didn't get quickly to all the industry. It's really known in the software engineering. If we have software engineering people in the audience, will hopefully they comment on that. It's very known in the software. Google, Amazon, they use it right now quite a bit. And I know from oil and gas, there are a few companies in Calgary also use it. So, and here we talk about Scrum. You're gonna talk about why. Let's talk statistic numbers, what makes sense to us as a business people. In a normal project, we got a big budget here in the start of the red line. We develop a product, we spend, and we release to the market at the end. Okay, 6 months, you invested a couple $1 million. Where's your return on investment? It has to happen after the project finished, after the product is in the market. And here you go, let's say you didn't get retention. The customer didn't like it. What's gonna happen? You wasted a couple $1 million. You didn't get your revenue back. In a Scrum, every sprint, you have to deliver complete an increment. When we talk about complete increment, it's a small piece ready to go, has a value. If you abandon the project at any minute, let's say, that product you develop, you could use it, has a value for your organization, has a value for your customer. So let's take a snapshot here. You release at this point in a traditional project management style. Where's the revenue? There's nothing there. In a Scrum, you got some revenue. Let's say you start making $50,000 here, and in 6 months you make $100,000. So your revenue always incremented in a Scrum versus a traditional because traditional is based on sequential. You need to finish to go. Sometime you have two activity going parallel. When they finish, you have a product. So it's really not delivering value, it's delivering task, and we go.
Well, if I see this correctly too, I mean, I get the value piece because even with the huge upswing of the traditional, it doesn't look like it ever catches up to the incremental wins of the Scrum. But from what I could see, it's almost as important that if things aren't working, we could pivot, change, or maybe even stop some of the less profitable ventures earlier in the piece. Is that correct?
That's correct. And also, let's talk about it from a risk perspective. What do we do in a traditional project management style? We create a risk plan and we monitor it and control it. Risk happen, here we go, we have to deal with the risk. With a Scrum, it's a time box. Maximum the sprint has a maximum is a 1 month. And has a value of in 1 month. Let's talk, if something happened, if the sprint is a 1 month, you're gonna lose only 1 month of worth of work, not 2 months, not 6, not 8, not a year. And your risk is very limited. You cannot reduce risk, we all know that. Risk always exists and depend how you deal with it. But doing everything in a sprint and a small time, your risk is limited because you're delivering a product and you're delivering value at the end of every sprint with a new methodology of a Scrum. And it's more with being agile, right? It's a Scrum framework, but it's a thinking agile. But what that means, how that Scrum framework work, right? And people is gonna look at me is like, what you talking about? We have a project manager there. What is different here? So let's talk about Scrum framework a little bit more. Okay, I'm a football guy or a soccer guy. Always when we get to the field, we talk about formation. The team has to have a formation, 3-5-3 or 4, whatever. In soccer, 4-4-2. In Scrum, always you have to start with formation. Your formation is the most important. It's the 3-5-3. And people is gonna, what you talking about? The first 3 is the 3 main role in the team. In that team, it's not a project manager, it's not one person, it's not a committee, it's a team. The one is a product owner who knows the product, who knows the voice of, he represents the voice of the customer and the stakeholder, has a vision. The second person is a Scrum Master, is a servant leader to the team. His job or her job is removing impediment from the team, making things easier for everybody, and has a continuous improvement mindset. And the third and the most important element of a Scrum is the development team. The development team is the people who's doing the work. We hire people and we pay them money because they bring value to us. Let them do what they do very good. And in a project management style, we make the decision as a project manager. In a Scrum style, the team is self-organized, makes the decision, they choose the work based on the guidance of the product owner and the product backlog. And we're gonna talk about what's the product backlog. The next 5 is the events. I will call them event because those events form the sprint, forms the Scrum. It starts with a product backlog refinement. We look at all the feature we want in the product. What is the acceptance criteria to get them completed? We go to the sprint start. Sprint start is a like fixed duration, 1 week, if you start 1 week, it's going to stay 1 week for the whole product life cycle. Or if it starts 2 weeks, you're going to keep it same so you can measure efficiency and velocity. You plan what you want to take in those 2 weeks of weight of work. You do daily Scrum, which is not a status update. A lot of us make a mistake and they turn daily Scrum of a status update. Is what I'm working on for the next 24 hours, what I worked on so everybody knows, and if I have a challenge or not. It's very highly recommended as a Scrum Master to be in the daily Scrum with the team to remove impediment. By the end of the day, by the end of the sprint, you got a sprint review, you got all the stakeholders in the room, the team, not provide a demo, they demonstrate the work. I'm not giving you a not completed product, I'm giving you a full product. Completed a product, ready to go, has a value to the organization, has a value to the customer to use it anywhere they want, part of this project or maybe not. And the most important event is a retrospective. The retrospective is a traditional, let's compare it to the traditional path, is a lesson learned. Usually in a normal project management, you do maybe lesson learned in the middle, lesson learned at the end. In the Scrum, you do lesson learned at every sprint. And highly recommended, and we don't use shall and should, it's highly recommended the team select one continuous improvement item and bring it back on the sprint planning. So what they're gonna improve for the next sprint to make their next sprint better than the one before, and continue. Can you imagine a 22 sprint, how many improvements they did from the first one to the last one?
Well, they're not looking in the mirror either. They're kind of doing it briefly so that they can prospectively look forward, which is helpful.
That's correct. And you go to the artifacts. The artifacts is a product backlog, visible to everybody. So stakeholder knows what's on the product backlog. The team knows what's on the product backlog. It's always getting refined. As we know, information, and during the sprint and after the sprint, and always it's getting in a continuous improvement mode, kind of. The sprint backlog is the amount of the known work we're gonna do for the sprint, and based on our capacity as a team. If I consider myself as a team member, I have a capacity to work on this in this sprint 20%. I can't take more. So why are you putting more on me? Because we're not gonna deliver. So you take work as much as you have capacity and you build, and penny on top of penny, you make $1, right? It's the same with a product. Small increment after small increment, you're gonna get a very solid product. And the product increment is what we're gonna complete, is a sum of completed work with the definition is what's done. And that is Scrum and the new way we should start think about with the COVID-19. I will go back 6 to 6. We have been in home, working from home for the last 4 months almost right now.
Yeah.
How many projects get slammed by this interruption? How many revenues get stopped here? And if we had a different mindset and we deal with the risk right away, we could have adjusted it quick. And did we? I don't know.
I look at this and I think it would be helpful. Like, I found this slide really good because it laid out the whole structure for me, but it might be helpful if we could line up the two methods, you know, like compare and contrast maybe project management versus the traditional approach versus Scrum. And we're running out of time a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind kind of briefly comparing the two, that would be really helpful.
Awesome. So I'm gonna do them one to one. Traditional project management, it's control and monitoring. Agile Scrum, empowerment. You empower the team and let them select. Then in a traditional PMing, you have a high risk and you have to be your risk management plan has to be very solid. With a Scrum, always you're dealing with a small short of time and consistency. And you're trying to make everything in continuous improvement. So your risk is very low. In one, you track what happened. Like track resources utilization, that's a normal project. In a Scrum, you're looking at the future. What can I do better? I finished this work. What is my velocity? What's my capacity? You're always being proactive versus reactive, right? One is focused on 3 elements: scope, time, and budget. The other one is focused on, I want to deliver value. I want to deliver value to my customer. I want to deliver value to my shareholder. And that's very important. One focus, and it's sequential, it's a process driven. The second one is the Scrum is based on continuous improvement, waste removal, and the key pillar in a Scrum, we didn't talk about it, and I didn't mention transparency, inspection, and adaptation. We are very transparent to each other. We inspect on every event, daily, weekly, and we change and we adapt. We're always in a continuous improvement manner. The project manager in traditional is a change manager reactive. He doesn't want to act on those, or they want to avoid the changes because they're gonna have an impact on their scope and budget. The other one in the Scrum, he's an enabler. I want change. I want change day in, day out because I want to get better. And one is driven on plans, documentation, Gantt chart, and all of those tools. The other one is developed on focus on people and culture, self-organizing team.
You know, that's been a consistent message with just about every single presentation that we've had as part of this Hasking Connects. And that's, we're going into a new phase where we're empowering people. It's less controlling. It's give the tools to people so that they can be successful. And you have to embed that into the culture. So this has been a lot. I guess, would you mind summarizing the key takeaways for people?
For sure. So I'm going to go from the bottom to the top. And you said very important thing, a previous slide. We hire the people to do their job. Let's empower them. They are the greatest asset to every company, people, right? So and a couple of people is going to ask, I hope, I'm not looking at that question right now, but is it multiple industry? I put a couple logos in the bottom, and it has a variety of companies. 3M is not a software engineering company. You develop product, right? Australian airline, Shell, IBM, Google, BP, Spotify. It's all those companies using Scrum, and they're bringing a product quick enough to the market to be ready, providing value, generating revenue quick enough. The 3 pillar we talked about is the concept of not only Scrum. Any successful business, to be successful and delivering value to their customer, you need to be transparent with your customer. You need to be transparent with your stakeholder. You need to look at the mirror and say, am I doing the right thing here? Am I wasting time and money? Inspect. And if you can adapt it quick, because that's what makes us better right now. Look at what happened 4 weeks ago, 16 weeks ago, we got hit with the COVID-19. Now we're trying to adjust for the new norm. It's the human being need to adapt quick. And we did adapt. We've been here for so long. We can adapt it quick. Just, we need to look on the past, live the present for the future, right? And a value-driven product. And it's the most important. We want value. As much as I don't want to manage the scope and time and budget, and they are important element, but the value of what I'm gonna deliver in every week is very important, and empower my people and empower my team to be self-organized as much as possible, because I hired them because they are the best of the best, right? So those, I think that's 3 takeaway from a business perspective, and I think Scrum is gonna be more and more, because we need to be quick and nimble moving forward after the COVID-19.
Okay. Well, I can see actually in the chat and things that there are a lot of questions, and but given the fact that I'm moderator, I can ask the first one. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's cool.
I was wondering, because Scrum sounds excellent, don't get me wrong, but are there any situations where Scrum does not work well or is a little less than ideal?
The most important, we have to remember, don't complicate your life. Scrum is developed as a framework for complex work. And if things, you know all the item, why you want Scrum? Look at the Scrum. If things getting complex and you want empirical framework, Scrum is perfect. If you know the steps, you built it before, it's just tasks. Yeah, go back to the traditional project management. We still use it. We still use both of them. You have to figure out which complex enough you want to Scrum, you want the value, there are high risk in it. Use a Scrum and versus traditional project management. I know. In a normal operation, you know your task. Use normal traditional project management. Nothing wrong with that.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I guess with that, I'll hand it over to Tanya.
Great, thanks. So if anyone has any questions, they can raise their hand under the participants menu and we can call on you from there, or feel free to add it to the chat and I can ask the question to George and Kathy as well. So we have had a few comments that are coming through, George, so maybe I'll ask the first one. The comment was, I'm having a hard time understanding why COVID has anything to do with this. Scrum is a very effective way of managing software projects regardless of pandemics. And waterfall is still the best for hardware projects. So do you want to speak to that and just address, why you felt this topic was timely right now?
It's interesting because they differentiate between software and hardware. And we go back to the scope and criteria. We're talking about a product. I want to deliver a product. I work in oil and gas. And we're not using a Scrum on a software, and we don't develop software. We develop a product. What the product is hardware and software, and customer feedback. We want the sprint concept because we want to get to the market quick. The market is changing very quickly now. With the COVID-19, what happened, and why I choose the topic this way, because I had a project going on the waterfall. And when we got hit with COVID-19, we had to adapt on inspections, where the customer is doing inspection, how we deliver a product to keep everything rolling. And by changing the mindset to kind of a Scrum in the beginning, we had every week meeting and we adapting. Okay, we don't have interruption to our supply chain this week. Next week we had an interruption to our supply chain. 1 week we didn't have a case of COVID-19 or something in our shop. We got something different. People like hours, man-hour change, shift change. We could not adapt as quick as possible if we didn't have a Scrum methodology or Agile framework. VP, by example, I know VP because I was in a training a few weeks ago, and a VP learning director was in it. VP and Houston using Scrum. They're not software engineering company. They're not hardware engineering company. They are oil and gas energy company. So I hope I answered the question.
Great. So the next one that came through as well was, are there aspects of Agile that would improve waterfall, or is it binary in your view?
So can we have mix between them? That's how we are. I like innovation. I'm a guy, I think outside the box. Can I mix them both? Yes. But if I want to evaluate Scrum versus project management, each one of them has case to use. We talked about complexity versus not complex. When you are going to implement Scrum and Agile, you want to implement the whole framework so you can measure the effectiveness on it. One question came a couple of weeks ago when we started preparing this presentation. Can I leave the name of project manager and a PMO and all the tools I have and just say I'm doing this Scrum? The first thing they tell you in the Scrum guideline, if you want to implement the Scrum, change everything, because people want to understand. They want clarity. We're making a change. Make the change, implement all the elements so you can measure on both of them. I used water flow in my career all the time, and now I'm looking at it as, if I knew what the steps, I'm gonna continue with water flow because I know the task, nothing gonna change, it's just monitoring the stuff. But if I'm developing a new product or I'm going to the market with a new idea, I'm gonna use a Scrum because I wanna be adapt, I wanna lower risk.
Great. So the next question is, if it takes 6 months to build the hardware, how do you do a 3-week sprint that produces a fully functional product?
Okay, so the hardware, let's say, few years ago, I developed a hard disk in the industrial form. When you're gonna build the hardware is a blocks. You're gonna work on the power supply first. You're gonna work on the communication next. You're gonna work on how you combine them together. But if you work on a power supply first, you look at it, okay, I have a power supply product. I could utilize it in this project, and maybe I'm gonna utilize it in the next project. And I can communicate and work on the next 3 weeks for the communication, pieces by piece. That's what the feature are. And by the end of the day, you could say have a one sprint is called product release. You combine them all, and all the pieces are already tested. They are in a completion. And here you go, you release it together. So it's a different mindset. I know where the question came, because I've been in those one too. It's like, how I'm gonna get to the end? Because I need to finish this first, and this next, and this third, and that, but how if all the pieces are tested and ready, and we did our research, we did everything, you're gonna put them like a puzzle together in the end, and here you go, you got the product. And then if the project didn't continue, you got the power supply, and you got communication protocol developed and ready for other project if you want to use it. It has a value to the company.
Thank you. The next one is, can you give a few examples of projects that shifted from traditional to Scrum lately, particularly in the oil and gas sector?
That's a tricky question. So I know for a fact in Canada had one of their biggest plant in the last 2 years is developed on a Scrum. That's what I know. That's where we start thinking in Canada, our customer, and we took the idea of Scrum at Tundra Process Solution to develop Scrum internally. We're looking at it. We shifted the smaller projects on a building for oil and gas to measure density and stuff like that from a traditional water flow to Scrum, because we needed to adapt it quick after COVID-19. So those is my personal experience. There are so many examples on Google if you want. It's our best friend now lately. So I really recommend you guys, if you want, there are also the book called the Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half of the Time, talk about different product, not only software developed with the Scrum.
That's a great tool. What is the most challenging aspect of implementing an Agile approach?
Is a self-organizing team. And that's the most important. And it's in a change management, people is the most important. And getting that self-organizing team working together is the hardest piece of a Scrum. Scrum is a very simple methodology, but it's very hard to master. And my challenge, and one thing we didn't talk about in a Scrum is no title. So your Scrum team could be a director working in a team and cannot pull his director title or his VP title, because he is there part of the team. We're gonna work together, and that adaptation of child-parent relationship or subordinate versus it has to disappear to make Scrum successful or Agile successful. They have roles, but it's very hard to change people who's used to, I'm the manager, I'm the director of this. How is this team working with and not coming back and consulting with me or something like that. So that is the hardest part, is getting the self-organized team and the title and the hierarchy in the traditional business moving forward.
It's a huge culture shift, isn't it, George? Like, it's not just, you can't just lay it out in terms of the structure. It's a whole cultural change in the organization.
It's a huge change. It's not and we talked about it in the comparison slide, people and culture, because it has to come from up, down to make that change. Because if upper management is not embracing a change and Agile, is not gonna work because it's new. You go inside an office and say, I'm using Agile. What is Agile? Why those guys making the decision? Why you're not making the decision as a project manager? I'm not a project manager. We work as a team. They know what they're doing. They are the best of the best. I'm gonna give them a vision. I'm gonna give them a goal, and let's work together to the finish line. And work together, not work individually, work together. And collaboration is the power, right? So
I think that's a great segue into the next question, which is there anything you would recommend in terms of familiarizing senior management or the board of directors with Scrum principles or language?
would you, Tanya, repeat the question, please, one more time?
Oh, sure. So is there anything you would recommend in terms of familiarizing senior management or the board of directors with Scrum principles or language?
Games. When we start implementing it, and from my personal experience, everybody took the book, we read it, we came discuss the book on a coffee break kind of, and we start playing games. It's like we put Agile in a game scenarios, and we played the roles for a couple hours, and how difficult it was. And there are a small game is called the Summer Meadow. So there are a couple criteria you get, and each team get a different criteria, and they need to present it in a picture, and how difficult people understanding this message. And that's where we started with upper management, because now the message is coming from the team to them. So look at what's written, nothing else. With Agile and director, all they care about is the value. As long as you present to them you're capable and accountable for the work, and you're gonna deliver sprint after sprint, they're gonna trust the methodology, right? And communication, and that's one of the key of Scrum. The team should not exceed 9 people, because you want to keep the communication. You might have multiple teams under the same product, but you should not have the team more than 9, because you want to keep the communication clear, and it would be very hard to control a communication more than 9 team members in it. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there a situation where you would keep using traditional project management? I think
if it's not complex and you know it, yes. And a regular operation and a regular production, you should. I really don't recommend Scrum in a regular production when you know all the facts, you know all the tasks, and you've been in it. You can do enhancement on it, but water flow will work perfect, and nothing wrong with that.
Great. If you want to start to implement Scrum, do you need a transition period, or is it just best to cut ties with traditional project management and implement Scrum immediately?
Immediately. You make the change and you move to Scrum. Where the challenge is creating your first product backlog. That's a learning I had, is getting the product backlog, the accepting criteria, and the definition of done is the hardest thing in Scrum, is getting to the definition of done. So other than that, if you create the Scrum, train your team, get them familiar with the methodology prior to the starting. And because when I read the book, I thought I'm smart enough, I will implement it. And I implemented everything backward. It was funny. So when I did the proper training with scrum.org and I did the Scrum guide, and I did the right way of learning, I came back and I said, okay, we need to adjust. But what did I lose? Only one sprint. By the time I started in the second sprint, I picked it up, and we had to adjust. So just get everybody familiar before you start. That's my only advice.
I think that leads well into the next question, which is, how do you budget with Scrum? Is the process different, or project budgets still need approval?
Okay, so there are a budget, there are an estimate. There are two different things, and there are actual costs. Is you're always gonna have your earn value. You're gonna measure that. But with a Scrum, do you really know what you're building? You don't. You create a product backlog, and you know you have kind of weighting average on every product. And you know maybe how many sprints you're gonna take. You got the fixed cost, which is the people working on the project, and you got the hardware cost or what you're gonna purchase and all of this. You still have to do the normal budgeting, but you're gonna measure per sprint. You're not gonna measure per the whole project. Is your sprint saved you money, or is your sprint cost you more money? And that's where the difference in the Scrum and the budgeting, the tools is still the same. You have to understand, I know from oil and gas, you can't kick a project unless you have the visibility on it, right? So how you're gonna get the visibility? You're gonna look at all the features, you're gonna determine approximately how many sprint, and you say, okay, by 2 months, I will have a better idea where I'm gonna go and how much it's gonna cost, because now you are in the middle of the work, you know what's going on, but you could budget it that way. You could budget it based on the sprint, your cost of material, and you move on.
Okay, thank you. The next question is there a good guidebook to Scrum to use for converting our seasoned traditional project managers?
Not really. I never seen it myself. It's like making conversion from PM to Scrum. I think you need to come in and say, okay, I want to implement the Scrum. Who's my team? Train the team, get ready, create a bug. The product owner is very important in Scrum. Knowing what we're delivering and knowing that value and knowing what the stakeholder want are a key. And the product owner play a very good role there because they kind of mentor the team and work with the team all the way to get to the goal. And the Scrum Master is a change agent. You have to have a change agent in the company, and doesn't need to be VP, doesn't need to be director. As a person trusted by the people, trusted by the executive, has the power to remove some impediment, has the ear of a CEO or COO or the director to move those impediments to make the team successful. Those two roles is critical in implementing the Scrum from a traditional project management to Scrum methodology.
My question for you is, you make it sound so great and timely, given everything going on in the world right now. Is there a reason why it hasn't been applied more broadly?
I think it's more awareness. It's more awareness of the tools. I saw one comment, Smart Technology here in Calgary used it for the last 7 years, I believe, or 8 years. It's been used in the software, and now we're breaking the tools to go toward it's a tools. How you implement the tools, you could implement it. Doesn't need to be in software in a different in the oil and gas now and moving forward. So it's a very important. And not non-IT. Another comment came, their client used it in the oil and gas as well. Like we're using it in oil and gas right now, and it's just awareness. And the Scrum methodology, yes, built on the software. And the guide, I think the latest guide I have in front of me is November 2017. Doesn't talk about IT. I did my certification in the last few weeks or few months on a Scrum Master and Product Owner and all of this. The exam doesn't talk about IT. They talk about scenario and the work, nothing else.
There's another question that just came in. I think it's a great one. Have you or your clients adopted the Scrum methodology for oil and gas non-IT infrastructure multi-year projects?
Yes, in Canada.
And if so, can you give any scope to that?
Yeah, there are an example. I think if you research in Canada, they had a full site SAGD developed based on a Scrum, and they saved money, and they delivered it below budget and on time. So
great, thank you. Well, with that, I don't see any more questions coming in, so I think we're going to wrap it up. So I just want to thank you, George and Kathy, for today, and I think that was really interesting topic. And was the last session as part of our spring series of Haskin Connects. So if you have a few moments to fill out the feedback survey that will be sent after the session, that would be greatly appreciated. And I want to thank everyone for joining us over the last few months. We hope to see you in the fall for some of our executive education programs and for the continuation of Haskin Connects. And I see somebody's asking a question about getting a copy, so a recording of the whole today's session will be sent out after the fact as well. And take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.